The intro to the interview was cut off, but enjoy the rest of it. Here's Dillon Martin.
So I'm a saxophone player here at West Texas A&M University. Study under Dr. James Barger. I think he's a fantastic professor. He's the reason why I chose to come here personally. As far as what I do on a day-to-day basis, with my instrument and stuff, I'm in the symphonic band here at WT. I play a bunch of literature. This semester we're going to Carnegie Hall. That's just actually really fun. Should be a really good opportunity for all of us. Yeah. I also play in the top jazz ensemble here at WT. I'm in Jazz 1 as lead alto, which is a good opportunity. And then some other jazz incorporated ensembles I'm in. I play jazz combo here in the area, here at Canyon and Amarillo. As well as some stuff through our Phi Mi Alpha Symphonia fraternity. We have a big band that I ran for a couple years, and now you participate in whenever I can. So I'm happy to be able to participate in all these ensembles.
Well, thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, of course.
First question I have: how long have you been playing saxophone for?
So actually, this is a good question. This is my first year where I've officially been playing saxophone longer than I haven't. So
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so this is my 11th year playing saxophone.
Wow.
I just turned 21, so I'm 11 years on the saxophone and 10 years off. So this is my 11th year.
What made you drive towards saxophone instead of other instruments?
Personally, the reason why I chose saxophone is because my dad played saxophone. It was kind of one of those things, like my dad's always been my role model, so I kind of just wanted to choose the instrument he played. It worked out in my favor though, because we found a saxophone for really cheap, and then I actually lived in Ballinger, Texas whenever I was in sixth grade. So I went in for band and they were like, "What do you want to play?" I just said saxophone. They said, "Okay."
Perfect.
And it worked out like that. So I chose saxophone just because my dad, my aunt actually also played saxophone. So it's kind of just one of those things that ran in the family. But past that, I feel like it has the biggest variety out of all the instruments. I'm obviously biased when I say that because I play the instrument, but a lot of in terms of classical music, a lot of instruments are going for the same thing. They're going for the same end result, whereas on saxophone, everybody's kind of going for their own individual thing. And I like that. It gives room for creativity. It gives room for expression, individualism. Yeah. And then in terms of jazz, I'm sure we can hear how different people sound. Yeah. But John Coltrane versus Paul Desmond, come on. It's completely different. And I feel like the saxophone incorporates those things more so than other instruments. And it gives me the opportunity to express my different emotions when I feel them. If I'm angry, I can express that. If I'm not, I can express that too. And saxophone helps me with that. So.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. How long have you been playing jazz for?
So I actually am not as seasoned in jazz as I am in classical. I sort of started out like most people in the band, just band class, and all that is classical studies most of the time. So they don't give a whole lot of opportunity for jazz, especially in the early stages. So I only got involved with jazz later in high school whenever I sort of found out that I could through podcasts and stuff. There's a really good podcast called the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. And I just started listening to that and just getting ideas of oh, hey, I can actually be creative off the page with all this different genre of music I'm not used to. So what I did my senior year of high school, for the first time ever, started listening to jazz every single morning. We had marching band rehearsal at 7 a.m. I wake up at 6. I go get coffee from Starbucks. I listen to jazz for that hour and listen to that podcast, and then go about my day for the rest of the day. Just get as little as I can throughout a long period of time. I feel like that really helped me.
How did you, when you first learned about jazz and started playing it, how did you differentiate it between classical sax and then jazz sax?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's really hard for a lot of people, especially on saxophone, because you have to do different things, how you play the instrument is completely different, and it could potentially, poison your classical playing or vice versa. So you have to be very intentional about how you play. You have to definitely make sure that you're playing in this style and you're playing in the other style, and you don't let them kind of cross paths. It can happen pretty quickly. Yeah. And I think that's something high school kids kind of run into. So if I'm teaching high school kids, and for me when I was in high school, I actually just kind of played jazz similarly. Yeah. Stylistically, I would do all the jazz style stuff, but I wouldn't necessarily play with a jazz tone. Yeah. I kind of just keep that same tone I was already building, and expanding off of it with stylistic stuff in jazz band and stuff like that. Yeah. It's really my beginning level or my entry level stuff.
Do you have a different mindset when you're playing the two genres?
I think so. With jazz, at least at first it was in improv, kind of get scared and you're just trying to play the right notes and stuff like that. But with how I how I differentiate them, you have to make sure that when you're thinking about classical music, you're thinking about it with a certain sound. I think that's kind of the most important with audiation. You know, it's something people talk about in the vocal realm, or like, you know, working on perfect pitch or whatever. You know, people do audiation all the time, like in oral skills and stuff like that. Transcription, especially, working on those audiation skills. But in the classical realm, I feel like you have to audiate the I don't know what the right word is, but like it's a warmer sound. I think it's more of a calm sound and has it's less gritty. You know what I mean? Like it's a smoother sound. So for me, mentally, like when I'm playing classical music, I'm thinking about like a magic carpet, if that makes sense. Like I'm floating on a cloud almost. Whereas in jazz, I'm trying to actually listen for the harmonies and what comes next, and kind of like trying to think about the melody and what I could be playing. Or if I'm playing like a big band tune, I'm thinking about the sound of the whole ensemble, the sound that I'm actually getting. Mainly because I am a classical player, so I have to think about more of those technical things in jazz. But I think thinking about your sound, thinking about how you change it in jazz is the most important thing. And like that whole cloud concept, I don't have really a lot of those things in jazz. It's kind of interesting. Like when I'm playing classical, I think if I don't think like I'm floating on a cloud, it's not very smooth, and I end up having a bunch of like bumps in my sound and kind of going crazy. You know, I just let it get out of hand sometimes. If I don't think that way. But in jazz, it's like if I do think like I'm floating on a cloud, I actually have less success. You can't really think as much. You kind of just have to let it happen, and then recover from what you are doing, if that makes sense. So to kind of answer your question, you know, in classical is, I think it's more thinking, definitely. You know, it's more like focusing on the audiation aspect, like I said. And then in jazz, I think you do have to think, but it's like you can't think too hard or think too much. You get in your own way, especially during improvisation. You start to stumble over yourself, and you're like, oh dang, I just played a note I didn't mean to play. And then you're like, oh well, I still have to keep going. And then you're like, oh dang, I just played a bunch more notes that I didn't mean to play. And then it kind of starts to snowball a little bit. Excuse me. And so I think like kind of clearing your mind, listening for those harmonies is most important in jazz. But it definitely is different. It's kind of interesting. I never had to think about that before.
So earlier you did mention you ran the 3.14 big band.
Yes.
How different is teaching jazz than playing in jazz?
That's a good question. I really enjoy teaching jazz, potentially more than playing jazz, mainly because it gets the students creative. A lot of people will say, and you'll hear this in the jazz world, and I don't know if I agree with this, but people will say like, you're not really playing jazz unless you're improvising. And I don't really know if that's true. I'm not like 100% on that train, you know. And I've heard it before for sure. But what I will say is that idea, it tells people to be creative, you know. Like the people who do say that like, you know, when you're playing and people think of the word jazz, I mean, think about it. There's like Latin styles, rock styles, there's blues, there's bebop, there's all these, there's hard bop, there's, you know, atonal, contemporary, there's like all these different realms of jazz you can listen to. Not all that sounds even close to the same, right? But it's all jazz. So those people say that like, you know, the improvisation part, the creativity part is the jazz. That's actually what it is. And so I think that's a really interesting concept. So to come back to the question, teaching jazz is really unique because not a lot of students in the classical world in like your normal band period will get inspired in the same way that they do with jazz because it's not their ideas and it's not like their brain, right? It's somebody else's that they're trying to match, or like somebody else's life that they're trying to understand, or you know, somebody else's life circumstances. And so teaching jazz is really unique. Of course, if we're talking about technical aspect, a lot of what I practice and teach is the same. Like, you know, in jazz, you want to make sure you know all of the proper chord tones. Like when you're playing, you know, we have 8 notes in a scale typically in each of those, you know, like any change over a set of changes in a solo section or something. Maybe it's the first chord in a solo section is A minor, and you have the A minor scale that has 7 notes in it, sure. And of course, we want to teach that in those 7 notes, notes 1, 3, 5, and 7 are the most important. And this is all technical stuff, you know. We want to teach that, but like, it's really unique because if you don't teach that stuff, students can still have success.
Yeah.
Using their ear, using like, you know, listening and like, oh, I heard they played this note over this chord, and they might not even know that that's that note over that chord, but they heard it and they just tried to recreate it by using their ear. And they have this really unique experience where they reproduce something they've heard before, and they have like a really big hit of dopamine or like a really big satisfaction in their life because, you know, it's really unique. I don't think everyone gets the same satisfaction out of classical music in the early stages.
I see, yeah. Well, for me personally, I've found it easier to learn more about my instrument and more about my technique from repeating my teachings to a lesson student. So do you feel like running the 3.14 big band improved your jazz mentality, improved your playing, improved your style in some sort of way?
Oh, definitely. I mean, like, you know, it's like when I'm playing, I'm thinking about the style, I'm thinking about what I need to be doing, not necessarily thinking about what I am doing.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like, I'm thinking about the end result more than what I'm actually like doing in the moment. Like, if I do one wrong, I'm not thinking about the one I just did wrong. I'm thinking about the one coming up.
Yeah.
And so when I'm actually on the other side of that and I'm not playing my instrument, I can actually think about what they are doing and like what's in the moment. So it's that's really interesting. Will you remind me of the question one more time? I think I'm like deviating a bit.
No, that's fine. I asked, how does if for you personally, if teaching jazz improved your style in jazz and learning more about things and stuff like that?
Okay. So my question wasn't my answer wasn't too far off. Yes, it definitely does. Just to give you a straight up answer, like when I'm standing in front of the band, I can hear these like multiple entrances, and like I don't know if you find this in I know you play in 3.14. I don't know if you find this in 3.14, but like sometimes we have like staggered entrances or something.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to play the beginning of it loud because that's the important part, and then you back off so that we can hear all the other entrances, right? When I'm playing in the ensemble, I know those things are supposed to be happening, but I don't always achieve them the way that they're supposed to sound, you know? Like in my own personal playing, like when I'm in Jazz 1, sometimes I don't back off as much as I need to. Or, you know, sometimes I don't hit the note at the beginning as hard as I need to on those little sporadic entrances where, you know, the different sections kind of interject with each other, right? When I'm on the other side, when I'm in the front, I can hear it very clearly. I can hear, the saxophones aren't actually getting down as soft as they need to hear the trumpets kind of interject in that moment. That kind of tells me, based on how loud they're playing, and because I've been directing the ensemble for long enough, I know how they play. Like Emmanuel Garcia is lead alto for the 3.14. He was when I was directing it, at least. And so I kind of knew, hey, this is his dynamic range. He's kind of about here in his dynamic range, you know. Is that really soft enough for me to hear the trumpets? If no, then maybe I can reevaluate my own dynamic contrast in Jazz 1, you know what I mean? Because there's definitely times, even listening back to recordings, where I don't get soft enough. Or maybe I stick out of the texture a little bit. And those ideas get brought to my attention in 3.14, and then I can evaluate whether I need to work on it in Jazz 1, if that makes sense. So
that makes sense,
and this is kind of a long-winded answer, but like I think it's so helpful.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to get good at jazz and you're in the early stages, just try teaching basic concepts of jazz, and you'll find yourself learning things from yourself. I think that's the cool thing about jazz.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've thought about recently. So I guess my first semester here, I had horn lessons, obviously. I would learn a lot, but some things wouldn't like stick, you know? And then the second semester, I started having lesson students where I would repeat what the horn professor, Dr. Manfredi, would say to me. And I'd repeat it to my students, and I felt like I understood it better. And I kind of reflected on my own playing. And it's just a nice thing. Just like teaching reflects back onto you, I guess is...
My professor, Dr. James Barger, he often says, like, my job is to eventually, and this is kind of a joke, he says, but I think he's told me before in a lesson, like, my job is eventually for me to not have a job, at least as far as you're concerned, because his job is to teach me how to teach myself.
Yeah.
And so teaching lessons is like amazing. Teaching jazz is amazing because you also learn how to teach yourself, kind of like what you're saying, right? It like reinforces ideas you already know. And if you're teaching people and they may have like a learning block or a learning curve in some areas, and you're also struggling in those areas, throughout that teaching process, you tell them things that kind of just come out of your mouth, right? You kind of say them, you're like, try this, and it may work. But then throughout that, experimenting process while teaching, now you have another tool to use in your own practice. So it's like, okay, I'm going to try that in my practice, see if that helps me and the same problems.
Yeah.
You may be having the problems at a much greater, like a much maybe smaller level, actually, at higher tempos, at harder difficulties, but it's still relatively the same problems.
Yeah. And then we were talking about the 3.1 for a big band. Right now, you're currently the president of Phi Mu Alpha.
Yes, I am, yeah.
Can you talk about PMA a little bit more, since they are the sponsor of Jazzy Fridays? Hold on. Sorry. Yeah. Can you just talk about them a little bit? Talk about what the mission is, and then, of course, the big band, how it reflects the mission of PMA.
Yeah. So Phi Mu Alpha is a national organization in America. It's comprised of all men, so it's an all-male fraternity. And the idea is to just get men in music to come together to, bring attention to our profession and give a lot of care towards our profession. Mainly seeking a higher purpose, right? Acknowledging that the work and putting in the work and seeking a better version of yourself is really the meaning of life in a way, and why we're all here and why we all do anything we do at the end of the day. We want to be better at something.
Yeah.
I feel like it's pretty common for everybody. And so Phi Mu Alpha is structured, it is a fraternity, yes, that's kind of what we have to call it, but it's more so a group of individuals who are like-minded in music and just want a better version of themselves with every choice they make, with every decision, every step of the way, just trying to be a better version through music, letting music kind of speak through us.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question about the 3.14 big band and how that kind of fits into it, it was created a few years before I got to college by a few individuals. I believe his name is Nathan Juarez. He was also he's now an alumni of our chapter of Phi Mu Alpha.
Okay.
He also went to my high school, ironically enough. We never really crossed paths, but he started the 3.14 big band. He just thought it would be a really good way for people who like jazz, love jazz, and are also a part of the fraternity or interested in joining the fraternity to get together and just have fun, to just play.
Yeah.
I mean, to do music for why it was created, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's been, it's done light years of work for our chapter. I feel like it's strengthened our brotherhood, it's strengthened our friendships.
Yeah.
It's made some friendships that I didn't even know I had turn into lifelong friendships.
Yeah.
And it's silly, just being in a big band can't make you have lifelong friends. Well, through a fraternity with like-minded individuals, I think it definitely can.
Yeah.
And so the big band's really cool. I think it's so super, super unique. There's kind of a lineage of people before me. I think really 3 before me. And it was Nathan Juarez, Darian Del Cueto, who was the main advocate, I think, for the big band. Zeke Roberts, who's still kind of around in this area. And then me. I was so fortunate to conduct the big band. And man, I can definitely say it's probably my favorite thing I've done in college.
Yeah.
It was worth every bit of effort. The same relationships that were strengthened within the band were also strengthened between me and the band. And I will eternally be grateful for Phi Mu Alpha and just jazz in general for giving me friends and for giving me a brotherhood of people through Phi Mu Alpha. It's a great thing. Anybody who has a chance to be in an organization that is a proper organization that cares about their members, it's amazing. It's really good.
Yeah.
And Phi Mu Alpha is that through music, which that's 2 wins. So yeah. Sorry, if you need me to expand more, I can.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
One of the things I viewed highly about PMA is the giving back to the community through music. So I know y'all would go sing at retirement homes a lot. And then also this past winter break, we went to a retirement home with the big band.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the things that kind of made me want to rush PMA even more, because of we do have a group chat, and the current runner of PMA sent an email he got of how much music had affected the folks, and how much like some people like felt young again.
Yeah.
And it's just like a beautiful thing, really. It's just, I think it's like the main thing of what I personally think the main point of PMA is just spread music.
I mean, I feel like, you know, it kind of is like what I said a little bit of, like, we have a bunch of people who are strengthening their own lives and getting a better life because they're coming together. Mm-hmm. But also through music, like when we have those experiences at those nursing homes, and we have one actually this month on February 22nd, where I think the Rush class will be there for.
Yes,
so,
yeah.
And we're going to be at the Hudson House here on WTMU campus. So that should be great. It's a great experience. We get to sing like meaningful songs to us that sound good and, you know, bring like a great sense of emotion and joy from the people listening.
Yeah.
There was a few individuals last year that I specifically remember walking in and like they didn't move a muscle the entire time. We were talking and saying like, hello, thank you so much for having us. You know, I hope you guys enjoy our program. Mm-hmm. And they just kind of are just, you know, sitting there waiting for it to happen and not moving a muscle. But as soon as we start singing, like as soon as we start singing, I'm not even kidding, it's like magic, dude. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. They stand up and they dance and they like move around. They like have conversations with us. It happened with the big band too, at the VA. Mm-hmm. There was a individual there turning 100 years old, and he hadn't heard big band since his 40s, and he got to hear "In the Mood" by Glenn Miller. That's something he heard in his 40s. Yeah. And personally, I think our big band's pretty good, so he heard it at a high level. So I mean, think about that. Somebody who has lived their entire life loving something, not being able to hear it, and then they get to hear it because of our big band. And I just, that's magic. It's amazing.
It's so cool. It's so cool.
Genuinely, like, I mean, you know, we're having a rush process right now with our organization. So we have to do like interviews and all this different stuff. Yeah. And I am getting asked at least twice a day what my favorite part about Find Me Alpha is. And it's just being in public, really. Like I keep saying singing in public, singing anything music in public. Mm-hmm. Like, we get to change people's lives. Yeah. That's not a thing people get to experience. Yeah. It's really unique, and it's through music, through jazz, through classical music, through singing, through anything that gets these emotions and this the kind of dopamine in their brain. You know, it changes their life for a brief moment. It's crazy.
Well, I want to give this little moment to thank PMA for sponsoring Jazzy Fridays. I guess there's no events coming up, or public events, I should say. But once there is, I guess fundraisers. Y'all will hear about it. Please support. Anything really helps.
Yes, we did just have a small sort of, not really fundraiser, but event. It was actually called Jazz Day, so it's, you know, appropriate for the show. Yeah. Where we invited some students in the area to come and be a part of the big band and rehearse with us and learn. Mm-hmm. And that just surpassed. So I think our next thing is probably somewhere down the road.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
The next segment I would like to do is Jazz or Not, where I ask you certain things and see if your opinion, if it's jazz.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, first up, it's funny that we have Elliot. Elliot, say hi. You haven't said hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Okay, so I know Elliot has a strong opinion, but do you think Frank Sinatra is jazz?
Okay. See, this is a good question. All right. This is one of those things that get brought up at gigs.
Yeah.
I don't know. See, I have a bit of a different opinion than most, I think. I would not call somebody incorrect for saying Frank Sinatra is not jazz. I would not say that they're incorrect. But in my own personal philosophy, I think if you're experimenting with non-traditional harmonies in a similar style to jazz and you're being as creative as possible, which I think for most of it Frank Sinatra was, I could say that is some sort of jazz. The same way that, like, we get in big band and play rock tunes.
Yeah.
You could say that's not jazz either, really. But in some way it is. That's kind of why we're playing it in jazz band. And I think Frank Sinatra kind of falls in this like weird gray area where like,
okay,
for musicians, probably no. For like intense, you know, like practicing jazz musicians who are like playing gigs every weekend, in like, you know, Memphis, I would say no. They're gonna say Frank Sinatra is probably not all the way jazz. But I think for the general consensus of people who don't aren't like instrumentalists or vocalists and don't actually like study music, I would say that is a pretty good introduction to the idea of jazz, I would think.
Yeah.
Like when you say jazz to a common group of people, that most of them will probably think of Frank Sinatra or like Michael Bublé of some sort.
Yeah.
And I think like, yeah, to an extent, it has a bunch of jazz elements and a lot of that stuff.
Next, do you think Leve is jazz?
Oh, this is a good one. I think no, actually. She has a lot of the same ideas, like as Frank Sinatra. Like she is this is kind of me going back on what I just said, actually. She has like ideas of jazz and harmonies, but I think the overall outcome of the music is less close to jazz than Frank Sinatra.
I see. Yeah.
I think.
I see.
Like Frank Sinatra's like playing with a big band. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And like there's like da do da da do da in Frank Sinatra, which is like common jazz language, right? There's even common jazz lines in the backgrounds of Frank Sinatra. Loewe's like, strings and like some piano harmonies, some synth stuff that is jazz chords, and you could analyze it as jazz, but I don't know if the overall outcome is jazz.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Especially her vocal technique, I think is a lot closer to non-jazz music.
Yeah, I see. Okay, next is like movie jazz or / video game jazz. What do you consider that jazz?
Oh, this is also there's so many good questions. Dang. There's like a whole community of people right now that are sort of like expanding on this idea of video game jazz. Like there's a real book. So when you go to gigs, most of the time, if it's like a jam session, like not a specific group of people playing a gig, and it's kind of open, you'll play out of the real book, which I'm sure most people who have done that know. And there's a version of that book that has all video game tunes, and it's just like stuff from video games. And there's like a big movement of that right now. But like if we're talking about the piece inside of the actual video game, most of the time it's really not like a jazzy thing. Like Insane in the Rain is a great person for this. He's an artist. It's just one word, Insane in the Rain music. His name's Carlos Aney. He's a fantastic saxophone player, and he can play a variety of different instruments that are he's very good at them too. Yeah. And he'll do like entire arrangements and post all of the parts on YouTube or something, right? Some arrangements we actually play in 3.14 are by him that I found on YouTube. And he does have jazz charts of those like Pokemon tunes, for example. Yeah. Like he'll pull stuff from Pokemon, and he has an entire album called Synovation, and it's just like Eternicity from Pokemon, or like Pokemart, or like, all this stuff. And in the game, like if we're playing the game, listening to the music, I would say no, it's not. Okay. But a lot of people have taken that melody and those like chords and ideas and expanded on them and turned them into like a jazz thing. And that usually turns out really well. Like Bob on Battlefield, for example, in Mario it doesn't sound the way we play it in Big Band.
Yeah.
But in that arrangement, I would say like that arrangement is jazz in a lot of ways. If we like give it the same parameters as we give like normal big band music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it leads to I guess it kind of leads to my next question. Do you consider like computers playing instruments as jazz? So like, for example, you were talking about Bawam. Most of it's not played by actual musicians. It's just played by technology. So would you consider it jazz?
This is a good question. I was thinking about this actually with the last question because of like the whole video game thing. Most of what changes from the video game track to the big band track is the background stuff. The melody usually stays the same, and that's kind of what I was getting at, is like they'll take the melody and turn it into a jazz thing. The backgrounds usually change more than like the melody would, right? If you're turning something into jazz. So if the backgrounds are like played in a manner that you're using like jazz, normal jazz like rhythms and style, if we're setting a beat, da do da, that's a jazz rhythm, versus like da 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 is not a jazz rhythm, right? So you can kind of hear that, and like that syncopation, aka like that swing that you hear in the jazz. If you can get that like good sense of that through the backgrounds of like a computer generated thing, and it sounds like say you input all of In the Mood into a computer, I would say, yeah, that's probably jazz. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be played with creativity. It has to be created with creativity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think it's very kind of individual in terms of like you can look at each track a little bit differently. But like just to finish off, I like the Japanese jazz is like a lot of computerized stuff, and it's way more like poppy than than American jazz. But it's also their type of jazz. You know what I mean? Like to them, that is jazz. So it's not weird that it's poppy to them.
Yeah.
To us, it kind of sounds more like pop music because we're used to a different thing. But to them, that's like their style of jazz. Like T Square is a good example. They play like pop jazz, like fusion jazz. You know?
Yeah.
But I would still call it jazz because of everything involved. And their main melody instrument is a uwe. So it's like an electronic type of thing. And uwe is just like, it's kind of like a saxophone, but just, computerized. So, like all that stuff that T Square produces is pretty computerized, but I would still call it jazz. So, it's kind of a general answer, I guess.
Yeah. My next question is so what are some of your role models in jazz, being I guess in your personal life and then also in like people you listen to?
Okay, yeah. There's, I would say, like 3 main people in this area that I really take a lot of inspiration from in terms of jazz. This goes from like, when I'm talking about the people in this area, this is not even just how they play or like recreating their techniques or studying what they're doing and trying to recreate in my own playing. The stuff I learned from these guys is stuff that you don't really learn about. It's like those things that you learn about on your first year of the job. Like, hey, whenever you have a jam session, if it's in a certain place, it might have to be memorized. So play a tune that's memorized. Like people don't really tell you that in the professional jazz world, a lot of them play by memory. So like if you pull up to a gig with a real book, they might not take it all that good, It's not that way everywhere. Most of these places here, they'll let you use real books and stuff like that. But it's like those things that I'm learning from these people in this area. So like Dr. Barger, I mean, he's my professor. I'll never stop learning from him. I don't think I could. He's a genius. Yeah. And then 2 other people in this area who aren't directly my teachers, but I've learned so much from them is Austin Brazil. He's a faculty member here at WT. He teaches class guitar, and he's a phenomenal jazz guitar player.
Yes, yeah.
I think he literally studied with Chris Potter at one point for a period of time. And I mean, Austin Brazil, he doesn't, I've at least haven't heard him talk much. He's kind of one of those people who's just there. Yeah. But man, without speaking, I've learned so much from him. Like musically, crazy. I'm just standing there listening to what he's doing, and I feel like everything about my playing is different. Like he'll play a solo, and if I'm the next one up, I solo totally different than I normally do because of what he just did.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so it's like I'm learning all these different ways of playing through his playing. He's also one of those people who organizes most of the gigs in this area. So like we play at the Western Horseman with the Amarillo Jazz Society Big Band on Mondays occasionally. He's the one who organizes all that. He organizes a lot of the combos that play in the area. He also organizes all of the jam sessions at the 806 Coffee Shop in Amarillo. And so I think if it weren't for him, we would not have as much opportunity to play jazz at all, really. I think he's been a very big part in this entire area, and I've learned so much from him. And then lastly, but certainly not least, I mean, man, this guy's like just as, I think this was Austin Brazil's teacher at one point. Yeah. So is Dr. Jim Laughlin. He also plays in the Amarillo Jazz Society Big Band. And he's one of those people also I have not gotten the chance to talk to enough, but like anytime I'm around him, I learn something I didn't know. Yeah. And I won't forget it because he made sure, he's just a phenomenal musician. He knows jazz vocabulary like the back of his hand, and he knows how to incorporate it well. And that's one thing I struggle with. So it's just, infinite learning here through these three guys. I don't think I could ever cap out. And then a lot of the professional jazz players I listen to, if I do listen to their words, it's mostly through like interviews or something. Yeah. So mostly what I listen to is their tracks they're playing. And there's a few that I really look up to. Not all saxophone players, which I think is really important. I played saxophone, but I don't listen to just saxophone players. I think it should be that way for everybody if you really want to like expand your variety of playing. So when it comes to saxophone players, I think my favorite saxophone players, my roommate can advocate for this, is Sonny Stitt. Sonny Stitt, you'll hear a lot of the same language through different tracks, but for someone who is learning jazz, that is actually like one of the best things that could happen. I think Sonny Stitt is one of those people who is like made it into the professional realm for very, very, very good reason. But everything you listen to can be a learning experience, and how he pieces everything together can be a learning experience, especially for saxophone players, because of the technical things that the saxophone has. And it's just like, man, like, yes, this lick that he played, I've definitely heard before in another track, but it was not played nearly the same way in the same part of the measure and the same part of the lick. You know, he added this before and after it instead of what he did in the other track. And so, like, for someone who's learning licks and trying to, like, get farther into that realm, I mean, man, like, number one for sure. And then some other people that I really like for sound, like for how I sound, is I know a lot of saxophone players will probably say this, is Michael Brecker. Okay.
Yeah.
We have to acknowledge that Michael Brecker is copied the way he is for a reason. Okay. He has one of the most unique and recognizable sounds on the saxophone. And if you're not even trying to sound like him, like if your end goal is to not sound like Michael Brecker, to sound different, Michael Brecker could be one of those people that you study simply because, like, he teaches you how to change your sound, if that makes sense. Like, he teaches you what to do to get that raw edge. And if you don't want it, then you know what not to do, right? So it's like, you learn. I mean, you could listen to him and learn all these different things. He also tends to play more variety of styles than just like a swing or like a bebop.
Yeah.
Whereas like Sonny Stitt, it's like all bebop, all hard bop. You know, that's the era he was alive in. But yeah, so those two guys, I mean, fantastic. That's like most of my listening. If you get in the car with me, Sonny Stitt probably going to come on, okay? Yeah. It's probably going to happen. I mean, there's a bunch of legends in the jazz world that I can't forget to mention, like Chris Potter. I mean, Chris Potter, you have Chad O.B. now. He's like kind of the, I don't want to say this because I don't know if this would make it matter or not, but like the new age Michael Brecker, I feel like he's kind of like taken over that role of like the experimenting and, you know, moving past what we're already doing. Yeah. So those guys are all fantastic, all saxophone players. But most of what I listen to is actually not saxophone for the reason that, I so happen to listen to myself play the saxophone 8 hours a day. A lot of the time, and it's not, you know, it's through ensembles and stuff, but a lot of the time I just want to listen to another instrument. It's not that like listening to the saxophone won't help me. It's that I just kind of want to listen to someone else. So, I mean, like, I love listening to trombone because I don't find a lot of good trombone recordings that I like love. And so I've consistently loved almost everything Wycliffe Gordon has put out. I mean, I'm pretty sure most people will say that too, but like, dude, I mean, that's also for good reason. Like Wycliffe Gordon. My favorite thing about Wycliffe is he'll also put other people on his tracks. So like, there's a really good one. I cannot remember the name of the track. But it's on the same album as like On the Sunny Side of the Street and those and Mood Indigo. If you go and look at that, like he has clarinet players throughout some of the tracks and like different stuff. There's different tracks of Wycliffe Gordon on YouTube with Wynton Marsalis and having like a line of saxophonists there to just play solos and like, man, those videos are so helpful. That's why I love Wycliffe, because he gets a lot of people involved. I'll mention him again, but Bill Waltraus is an amazing trombonist from about the 1950s-ish, 60s. A little bit earlier on, but man, that's a sound you won't be able to forget. Really nice and mellow, you know. Focusing on the sound aspect of trombone. Some good trumpeters I like to listen to, just so I don't leave it out, is, you know, of course, Miles Davis and Dizzy Gillespie, because they're the legends. But I really, man, nothing gets me going like some Roy Hargrove tracks, you know? I'm like, oh, man, come on. So, you know, really those. I mean, I kind of try and listen to as much as I can, just so that way I can get as much variety as I possibly can. But yeah, those are definitely like some of my top ones.
Yeah. I have two more questions for you, and then we'll wrap up the interview. Cool. First one, pretty short question. If you had to pick the playing ability or the writing ability of any jazz artist ever, who and what would it be?
Oh, man, this is crazy. Yeah. Okay. Do you want me to pick both or one of the other?
No, just one.
Just
you
one?
only had the ability to pick one.
Okay. Well, I'll just say I have tried, and it's not that I don't like it or that I think it's bad. I just can't do it. And it's composition. I'm just not very good at it. I'm like, I've tried. I really have. I've sat down for hours before trying to compose. I got 2 measures in. So I don't know if it's mostly, jazz improvisation to an extent is composition, but I tend to overthink things. And in jazz improv, it's like, it's gone. There you go. You don't get to recreate it. You don't get to think about it. It just happened, and you get to move on. And if you don't, you're kind of toast. So you don't get the opportunity to dwell on what you did. And I do that a lot. So like when I compose, it does not usually go well. Okay. So I definitely find myself more of like the performer side. And this is a hard question.
Yeah, there's a lot of great options.
I would pick a legend because I feel like that's the smart choice to pick somebody who's a legend.
Yeah.
But I'm actually going to go with a bit of a newer answer. So this guy is still alive, and he's actually like around the age of 30. He's like not old at all. It's Patrick Bartley. So Patrick Bartley has just blown up on the internet for a very, 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 very good reason. But I think he has one of the most insane creative minds I've ever seen. I got the privilege to see him live, and he played his very first album with his trio ever in that concert that I saw him live.
Yeah.
And like none of the tracks sounded the same, but all of them sounded like the best to ever do it, if that makes sense. Like he knew how to play in every single style perfectly.
Yeah.
With the correct jazz vocabulary when it was needed. He like the swing tracks on his album incorporated jazz vocabulary because they're swing tracks. And the non-swing tracks were more of him speaking his own voice, incorporating his own and like it was a very unique experience. I think he's one of the most versed, like well-rounded people because he has done so much studying. I mean, there's it's actually a documentary, I think it's on HBO Max, of Wynton Marsalis. And Patrick Bartley is like 8 years old, and he's in that documentary. Or he's like, he might be older than 8, but he's like
around
he's
there.
Pretty young, and he's like he's in the documentary with Wynton Marsalis, and he's now like actually an adult now, and he's obviously way better than he was as a kid. But like, it's not one of those kid prodigies you saw who kind of fell off. He like, in my mind, every time I listen to Patrick Bartley, he's already one of the best to ever do it. And I think most people I talk to feel that way. Most saxophone players especially. Yeah. He has control over the horn like nobody I've ever heard. And he has musical ideas like nobody I've ever heard. He knows how to play in every single style. He knows all the jazz vocabulary. Anytime I see a short of him on YouTube, it's like, hey man, y'all get a load of this cannonball lick that I found. And it's like, it's like crazy for 10 minutes, right? I'm like, what are you doing, man? You're a freak. You're a freak of nature. And yeah, I mean, that Patrick Bartley. Yeah, he's a great musician.
Okay, well, my last question to wrap things off is: do you have any advice to young jazz musicians? And what is your hope for jazz in the future? Yeah,
just simple bit of advice for young jazz musicians, and I try and say this like at Jazz Day whenever I teach jazz or when we have any jazz events, is to keep going. Don't get discouraged. I mean, it's that way with every bit of music, but like you're gonna have a lot of creative barriers in the beginning with jazz. Like you may be one of those people who is one of the best musicians in your entire school, and you join jazz band for the first time and you are lost, and that's okay. Like that's how it is, It's a new thing. It's a new genre of music. Jazz is like, you may know how to play the saxophone, but if you don't know how to play jazz, you may not, recreate the same end goal, if that makes sense. So just keep going. You could easily get discouraged. And like at Jazz Day, there was even some people like, man, this seems like too much for me to learn.
Yeah.
Like in one day, it is too much for you to learn. That's kind of the point. It's like a lifelong process. Like Sonny Stitt never stopped playing his horn.
Yeah.
Like there's recordings of Sonny Rollins right now, because he's still kicking, he's playing his horn. He has like completely white hair and a long white beard, and like he's old, man. Yeah. He's still up there playing because it's a lifelong pursuit. They're lifelong learners, and that's like this whole jazz thing. Yeah. So if you're young and you're just getting into it, man, just ease into it. Don't like go crazy and expect to be good at it all at one time. Rome was not built in a day, and man, I feel like jazz is more complex than Rome. All right,
Yeah.
like personally. So just take some time, you know.
Yeah.
You'll get it.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dillon, for being the special guest.
Yeah, thank you so much for having
Jazzy
me.
Fridays. Of course, everyone. Of course. Why do I keep saying of course? We have the Polaroid picture. Make sure to see it on Instagram at Jazzy Fridays. And make sure to stay tuned. We have so much more jazz coming up. We have, of course, Elliot Sight Reads later on. Once again, thank you, Dillon. Thank you, PMA, for being the sponsor. I'll catch you all in a little bit. Goodbye. Wait, Dillon, I forgot to ask you one more thing. What's one song you would like to recommend to be played next?
Okay. I'll just do it real quick. So this is my favorite jazz standard. Personally, my favorite jazz standard. It's, in the real book, it's actually called something else, but it's in Spanish. It translates to No More Blues, because blues is, played all the dang time. So,
Yeah.
No More Blues by none other than Bill Waterhouse. I mentioned him earlier.
Yeah,
that entire album is like, it's gold for a jazz musician. So go listen.
Perfect.
But No More Blues.
Yeah, perfect. Well, make sure to stay tuned. I'll catch you all in a little bit.